Greetings to all C3RF members and friends across Canada, indeed around the world, and a special welcome to the folks at Veterans for Freedom on their dedicated streaming channels as they view this video summary of the C3RF update for 30 May 2025. The title of this update is Bamboozled, and it begins by noting that it didn't take too long. Who would have thought that within 24 hours of the announcement of a new, not like the last one, Liberal cabinet, we would see a just like the last one, Liberal cabinet? The good people of Canada can be forgiven for being surprised after signing on to promises of a revamped leadership cadre that would, quote, be purpose-built for a hinge moment, unquote. Gone would be the days of the old Liberal policies that saw the stagnation of industrial output, including that found within the landlocked oil and gas energy sector, a housing crisis that was making homeowning an impossibility for younger folk, and a crimes rate that paralleled those of the most violent American cities. The hinge moment would come and go in a matter of hours as newly minted ministers of the Crown would step up to the microphone and dispel any notion of a change in direction. First up to the mic would be our newly announced Minister of Canadian Identity and Culture, Stephen Guilbeault. He seemed to be reluctant to leave his old ministry in the form of the Environment and Climate Change of the 44th Parliament behind, as he insisted on pontificating on the status of pipelines in the new 45th Parliament. There would be no need for such, as the Trans Mountain pipeline was at less than half capacity, and anyway, there were no private consortiums lined up and ready to invest in new projects. So much for the Prime Minister's election promises to keep an open mind on east-west pipeline options. The open-mindedness canard was further placed within the realm of the bamboozle when another cabinet minister, this time Dominic LeBlanc, took the microphone and declared that the energy superpower status that Carney promised did not necessarily mean energy corridors flush with pipelines. These, he said, could be populated with transmission lines for electrical power or even railways. The disconnect between perceived campaign promises and the ministerial pronouncements that followed the Liberal election win left some wondering, have we been bamboozled? Prime among these was the Premier of Alberta, Danielle Smith. Her interest on behalf of Albertans can be easily understood given the demands that she had recently presented to the federal government. These demands contained 9 points that included the revocation of Bill C-69, that was the No Pipelines Bill, Bill C-48, the No Tankers Bill, and the abandoning of the net zero car mandate. It's interesting to note that the latter EV car mandate has the power to motivate Canadians across the board to unite against the coerced acquisition of electric vehicles. This, as up to $52.5 billion of their tax money was likely flushed down a black hole in support of propping up an EV industry whose North American market had collapsed. The attack on the public purse in such a fashion to address ideological goals should worry Canadians who treasure their heretofore representative democracy. After all, hundreds of good men died in 2 successive rebellions in both Upper and Lower Canada over the period 1837 to 1838 to secure the right to have their say in matters of governance, including just where their tax dollars were spent. These uprisings saw everyday citizens rise with pitchforks and other farm implements to wrest control away from an unelected elite in the form of the family contact and the Chateau clique, respectively. Their efforts would prove successful and pave the way for a Durham report that itself would open the door to the institution of a responsible government, a government dependent upon the support of an elected assembly rather than a monarch or their representatives. This facet of Canadian governments would be enshrined in a Section 3 of the Charter that protects the right to, quote, effective representation, unquote, for all Canadians. Responsible government in Canada would mark it as a member in good standing with other Western nations, founded upon the notion that the citizen had the right to rule him or herself through their elected representatives. The distinction was a powerful one and would see these like-minded nations in alliances dedicated to defeating forces of an autocratic bent through the 20th century to the present day. Unfortunately, the charter-driven right for citizens to access, inform, and shape government decisions through their elected representatives has become a bit of a bamboozle over the course of the last 10 years. Justin Trudeau's parliamentary sessions are flush with examples that include the shuttering of the whole of Parliament for the Wuhan virus crisis, the prorogation of Parliament to circumvent committee investigation of the WE scandal, and the recent prorogation of Parliament to escape a non-confidence vote. So much for a representative democracy. Long stretches of absenteeism by our elected representatives in our political halls of power is disrespectful of both a citizen's right to know and his or her pocketbook. During the Wuhan virus crisis, for example, chances were that your representative was locked out of the House of Commons while a COVID-19 committee of some 30-plus hand-picked MPs shoveled more than $400 billion out the taxpayer door. Quote, without most of the tools needed to truly hold a government accountable, unquote. The results were predictable, with at least 25% of related expenditures, quote, wasted to overpayment and fraud, unquote. The engineered lack of oversight continues to this day, with special warrants being issued to pillage the public purse without debate and approval by elected members of parliament. First, it was some $40 billion at the beginning of April, and then a few weeks later, another $33 billion to address, quote, urgent public needs, unquote. Unbelievably, such anti-constitutional raids on taxpayer funds are slated to continue until a formal budget is raised and passed in the fall 2025 timeframe, an unsettling and indefensible prospect. Worrisome as the pillaging of the public purse through unauthorized authority might be, there has been a much larger bamboozle going on that strikes at the heart of the public's trust in its own leadership. This would be the realm of charter rights and freedoms that only a few short years ago were revered by the citizenry writ large. This belief was brought into question with the onset of diversity as our strength mantra that some saw as an entry point for the preferential treatment of some identity groups over others. This was no small thing, as an outcome would speak in direct opposition to one of the underlying principles upon which the nation was founded, that being the rule of law and the equal treatment of all under it. Accordingly, it now seems that those who saw diversity as an off-road to identity politics and divisiveness were prescient. Perhaps the best example of contrasting treatment under the law between two identifiable groups is demonstrated in the case of Freedom Convoy 2022 and pro-Palestinian protesters. In the former case, as noted on several occasions in these update pages, blue-collar working-class Canadians were summarily dismissed by those they sought dialogue with before they were pilloried as Russian assets and then set upon through the invocation of the Emergencies Act. Some would have their bank accounts frozen, while selected leaders would be charged with crimes as nefarious as mischief and thrown into jail with no allowance for bail. Indeed, some 3 years later, convoy leaders Tamara Leach and Chris Barber would still be under attack by prosecutors with threats of years in prison and even the destruction of their livelihoods in the form of confiscated trucking rigs. There would be no mercy. Meanwhile, where the convoy lasted only 3 weeks, the pro-Palestinian demonstrations would commence almost immediately after the slaughter of 7 October 2023 and continue to this day. Where the truckers would dance in the streets in accordance with a court ruling that supported their charter right to assemble and protest, the pro-Palestinians would receive no such clearance, would intimidate and vandalize specific neighborhoods with smoke bombs and bullets. And finally, where the convoy would leave emergency routes open and available for police use through their lines of trucks, the pro-Palestinians would actually interfere with ambulances carrying children in medical distress and force them to turn around. At the end of the day, those on the wrong side of the narrative would be facing jail time, while those in its favor would be allowed bail after 1 day of detention, followed by a stay of proceedings thereafter upon a donation of $500 to a charity and a promise to be better. How could one not think that the former had been bamboozled out of their charter rights and freedoms? In closing, a reminder to join us at CanadianCitizens.org, where you can see this update in its full glory, including links to all of the cited documents. Simply go to the News tab at the top of the page and select C3RF Member Updates from its drop-down menu. Until next time, this is Russ Cooper signing off, wishing you and yours much happiness and freedom from C3RF.